After hours. At 2 a.m., my cart sat inside the locked executive suite. Double pay sounds like a gift when your rent is late, so I took the overnight janitor job at the old office building and told myself the quiet would be good for me. After 8, the elevators stopped on most floors, the lights went to half power, and my world shrank to a cart, a ring of keys, and the soft wheels on carpet. I liked being alone with my thoughts, until the building proved I was not alone. I had a routine by the second week. I started on the lobby tile, then worked upward, emptying bins and wiping fingerprints off glass doors. The night security guard usually checked in once, then stayed in his booth watching a wall of screens. He was friendly enough, always talking about overtime and how nobody notices the people who keep a place running. I nodded and kept moving, because my job was to stay invisible. That night the air felt stale, like the building had been holding its breath all day. Around 1:30 I finished the 12th floor and rode up to the executive level, mostly because it was on my checklist and mostly because it never needed much. Those suites were locked down, with keycard access and a thick door that clicked like a vault. The sign on it said authorized personnel only, which always made me want to hurry. When I reached the hallway, the door to the executive suite sat a finger-width open. The latch was not seated, and the card reader was dark, like it had never been used. I stood there listening, because a half-open door in a silent building is not a normal thing. I pushed it with 2 knuckles and it drifted wider, and I smelled my own cleaner already in the air, sharp and familiar, like someone had been using my cart. My cart was inside. It was parked near the reception desk, neatly, like I had left it there, except I had not. Someone had pulled out my gloves, my wipes, my spray bottle. The overhead lights were on, and the executive hallway beyond was bright enough to show fresh streaks on the polished wood. Then I saw the night security guard at the far end, leaning into a conference room, wiping the table with a slow, steady motion. I said his role, because I did not know what else to call him, and my voice came out thin. He turned without hurry, holding my spray bottle like it belonged to him. He did not grin. He did not act surprised. He just looked at me the way someone looks at a clock that has started running. He tapped the badge clipped to his belt, not his usual one, a heavy access badge with the building owner logo on it. He told me he had copied keys months ago, and he said it like he was sharing a tip about saving on groceries. He explained how the owner kept spare badges for visiting executives, how easy it was to borrow one from a drawer and return it later. He said he came up here after hours to practice staging accidents, the kind that turn into claims, the kind that make paperwork disappear. His words stayed calm, and that calm made my stomach twist. I tried to back into the hallway, but the executive door clicked behind me, and the latch caught with a sound that landed in my chest. He was between me and the card reader now, and I realized he had been waiting for me to notice. He told me I was a loose end, because I had seen him wearing the owner badge, and because my time cards would put me on this floor at this hour. He said nobody would believe me. I said, I can forget it, and I heard myself bargaining, which made me feel small. He stepped closer and told me forgetting was not the problem, talking was the problem, and he did not need a witness. He reached into his pocket and tossed my keyring onto the carpet, and I watched the keys scatter, because my hands were shaking and I could not catch them. Then he pushed my cart, hard, and it hit my knees and drove me backward. The cart pinned me against the reception desk, and he leaned in with his forearm across my throat, not hard at first, just enough to tell me he had control. I tried to twist away, but the edge of the desk dug into my ribs and stole my leverage. He said falls and panics and bad timing were easy to write into a report. My vision narrowed, and I tasted metal, and I understood he meant to erase me from the story. I woke on the carpet with my head buzzing and my throat raw, and the lights above me had been switched off. The building was back to its dim night setting, like it had reset itself. My cart was gone, my phone was gone, and my keyring was missing. I crawled to the executive door and pressed the push bar, but it did nothing because it was locked from the outside. Somewhere down the hall, a printer started and paper fed through, steady and patient. The first thing I heard in the dark was a gurney rolling toward me. The hospital hired me for third-shift janitor work in the abandoned East Wing, a place they said was being renovated in phases so it would not disrupt patients. My tasks sounded simple. Mop the hallway, empty old bins, wipe dust off doors, log anything that looked damaged. After midnight, the wing felt hollow, long corridors, taped arrows, plastic sheeting, and quiet that made you listen to your own steps. On my first nights, I saw nobody, just the dim glow of exit signs and work lights left on low. The air carried paint, old disinfectant, and something stale that clung to fabric. I kept my radio clipped to my shirt, and the supervisor in the main building checked in once an hour. He always sounded flat, like he was reading from a card and waiting to be done. On the third night, I noticed fresh streaks on the tile near the old operating theater doors, dark and sticky, dragged in a line like something had been pulled. It did not look like paint, and it did not match the dust patterns around it. There was a copper smell, sharp enough that it made my mouth taste wrong. I stood there with my bucket and mop, debating whether to touch it or call it in. I keyed my radio and said, "I have a spill near the theater doors. It looks recent." The supervisor answered fast, and his voice carried heat that had not been there before. "Do not file anything," he said. "Clean it and keep your voice down." I said it did not look like a normal spill, and he cut me off, saying, "You are here to clean, not to talk." I tried to follow instructions because I needed the paycheck, and because a hospital is supposed to be safe at night. I dipped the mop and pushed it across the streaks, and the water turned a dull brown. The smell grew stronger. Halfway through, the overhead lights blinked once, then went out. My radio gave a brief hiss, then nothing, like the channel had been shut. The wing was never fully dark. There were always wall lights and glowing exit signs. This time, even those were gone, like someone had cut power only for this corridor. I could hear my breathing and the slow drip from my bucket. Then I heard wheels, a squeak that repeated with a heavy rhythm, coming from the far hallway near the service elevator and moving toward me without stopping. I called again. "I lost lights. I need someone to check the panel." The radio gave me silence. The wheels kept coming, close enough that I knew it was a gurney by the cadence. Small wheels turning, larger wheels rolling weight. I backed toward the theater doors and felt for the handle. It did not move. My fingers slid over cold metal, and I realized the doors had been secured from the other side. A figure entered the faint glow near the baseboard, pushing the gurney with both hands, shoulders hunched, head down. I recognized the fired orderly from my first week, not by his face but by the way he moved. He stopped the gurney in front of me and said, "You should have stayed on the main floors." I told him he was not allowed here, and he said, "Neither are you." He reached under the gurney and pulled out a strap. I stepped back and my heel hit my bucket, and I stumbled, sloshing water across my shoes. I tried to run past him, but he moved fast, grabbed my shirt collar, and slammed me into the tile wall hard enough to blur the edges of the hall. My radio fell and clattered near my feet. His hand pressed my throat until my air went shallow and my hands went weak. He leaned close and said the supervisor had been helping, that the east wing was their private lane, where nothing reached the main desk. He said the loading dock door could be opened during shift change, and the supervisor made sure certain cameras faced the wrong way. He said the theater still had working drains and a locked supply room. He spoke like he was explaining a schedule, and that calm made me shake. I fought until my shoulders burned, but the strap wrapped my wrists and bit into skin. He hauled me onto the gurney and cinched another strap across my chest. For a second, the lights returned, long enough for me to see the supervisor at the far end of the hall, hands in his pockets, watching without coming closer. Then the lights cut again, and the gurney rolled, and the squeak carried me away down the corridor. When I came to, I was on the floor of a utility closet near the renovated side, half tangled in mop heads, wrists swollen, throat bruised, head ringing. My phone and radio were gone. The closet door was not locked, like someone wanted the scene to look harmless. I staggered into the main building and told the day receptionist I needed security. She checked the schedule and said there was no record I had been assigned to the East Wing. After midnight, I realized the kid had taken my keys when the service doors started opening on their own. Cleaning the closed-down shopping mall after midnight felt like the easiest money I had ever made. The place had been shuttered for a year, anchor stores gone, escalators silent, skylights dusty from neglect. My job was to sweep, empty trash left by contractors, and checked that the service doors were secured. I worked alone most nights, pushing my cart past empty storefronts and listening to the hum of old refrigeration units in the food court. The first time I heard glass break, I thought it was a tile popping loose from temperature change. Then it happened again, sharper, followed by laughter that echoed across the atrium. I hurried toward the food court and found a teenage kid standing inside a kiosk, knocking display cases off the counter with his elbow. He froze when he saw me, hands up, breathing hard, eyes darting like a trapped animal. He said he was just hungry, that he had been sleeping behind the old arcade and thought nobody would care about a few snacks. He looked thin and young and scared, and for a second, I saw my younger self in him. I told him he could take what he needed, and then he had to leave. He nodded fast, grabbed packaged food from the shelf, and kept thanking me while backing toward the corridor. I watched him go until he disappeared through a side exit I had unlocked earlier for a contractor. I locked it behind him, or at least I thought I did. The rest of the night passed without incident, and I told myself I had done a decent thing. When I clocked out at 4, I hung my keyring on the hook in the supply room and went home without counting the keys, because I had never had a problem before. The next night, I noticed the ring felt lighter. One of the small brass keys for the exterior service doors was missing. I told myself I must have left it in a lock somewhere. I searched my cart, my pockets, even the trash bins, but it was not there. I planned to report it in the morning, and then I heard the crash from the food court again, this time louder, followed by multiple voices shouting over each other. I ran toward the noise and saw 3 older boys with the teenage kid from before. They were smashing the glass fronts of empty jewelry displays that had not been cleared out. One of them carried a duffel bag and was sweeping items into it with both arms. The teenage kid stood near the service hallway, watching for me. When he saw me, he called out, "It is just him, hurry." I reached for my radio, but one of the older boys shoved me back against a pillar. The impact knocked the air from my chest and sent my radio skidding across the tile. I told them they were on camera, and one of them laughed and said they knew exactly where the blind spots were. The teenage kid held up my missing key and waved it like a trophy. "You should not trust people," he said. They moved fast after that. One grabbed my arms from behind while another twisted my wrists together with a plastic zip tie pulled from his pocket. I struggled and managed to kick one in the shin, but he responded by driving his shoulder into my ribs. Pain spread through my side and my legs buckled. They dragged me down the service hallway, past my cart, past the darkened arcade, to the janitor closet near the loading dock. They shoved me inside and slammed the door. I heard the click of the lock, one that only worked from the outside. I pounded and yelled until my throat burned, but the music of shattering glass and running footsteps drowned me out. Through the thin door, I could hear distant sirens growing closer, echoing off the empty parking lot. The boys ran past again, laughing, shoes slapping tile, and then the building fell quiet. I stayed on the floor with my hands bound, listening to the sirens fade. They had used my keys to open the dock doors and slip out before anyone arrived. By the time morning security found me, the food court looked like a storm had torn through it. They asked how the thieves knew the blind spots and which doors were active. I did not answer right away. I kept thinking about the teenage kid thanking me while he studied my keyring.